It is the year 2472, and the Earth has suffered a great calamity. Hundreds of years of popular culture have vanished. Without the sacred films and texts for guidance, civilization is devoid of anything cool. Then, 3 incubation chambers are unearthed, and from within, men from the time of the great blockbusters emerge. Now, through highly interesting conversations, they share invaluable insight about what once was. The movies, the shows, the comics, toys, and books. This is
the Hyperspace.
Podcasting in the 25th century.
Welcome in, podcast pioneers, to the Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century, the interweb's first and only podcast. My name is Jared.
And I'm Mike.
And Mike, we have with us once again our special guest. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Norman Bates.
That's right, and having Norman with us can mean only one thing. Our Psycho retrospective continues. Now, if you haven't heard the first part of our Psycho retrospective, please go back a few episodes and listen to it first. But before we get started with the show, it should be noted that when we recorded this episode, our good buddy Matt was out sick with the tube trots. So you won't be hearing the dulcet tones of Matt in this episode. And now we continue that conversation, which is already in progress. You know, Psycho 2 was a pretty big hit when it came out in the summer of 83, I think it was. And it would be 3 years until the next film in the series.
I was just going to see real quick how it was received critically. I can't imagine it was received very well.
I think people thought, Anthony Perkins did a great job.
Variety deemed the film an impressive 23 years after follow-up to Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 suspense classic. I think what it is with these movies, that you just, it's sort of like Jaws. Like Jaws 2, I like Jaws 2, but you're never going to have another Jaws. And, Psycho, you're never going to have another Psycho. So you got to make a choice. Are you going to roll with it and watch the sequels and take them for what they are, or just stop at the first one? There's movies that I don't go past the first movie. After the first movie, it's garbage. So you can either decide you can roll with it and go with 2 and 3, which are never going to be as good as the first one, or you go with it.
Yeah.
And you could do a lot worse.
Of course. Psycho 2, of course, with Psycho, you can, like you said, you could stop at the first one and, you're fine. But for those who choose to continue, as we are doing, there's ups and downs to come. And for me, Psycho 3, I hadn't watched it in years until just today, and I popped it in immediately following Psycho 2.
Norman Bates is back to normal. But Mother's off her rocker. Again.
Norman, is that you?
Yes, Mother. It's me.
In the film, not much time has passed since Psycho 2, because there's been 3 years passed in the real world, but in Psycho 2, we are picking up, a month or two after the events of the second movie, because the through line here is people are still searching for the missing Emma Poole, who, is who Norman has made his new mother. So there are people still looking for her, and Norman is really getting the motel back on track. That's part of the story. He's done some renovations, and he's getting ready to open it to the public again.
But then they introduced totally new, fresh characters.
Brand new, yeah. There's there's definitely holdovers from the second one, but we're introduced to a character named Duke, played by Jeff Fahey,
who I'm currently watching in Lost.
Yes, who is also Lapidus. Lapidus, who is really a fantastic character.
Yeah, he was really good, and he was really good on Lost.
And we're introduced to a young nun who I can't remember her name. She has
I always remember her as the adult version of the daughter from Mommy Dearest.
Okay.
She was also in Lost.
She was in Lost. Yeah, she played.
She was the sheriff.
Yes, she was. I think her and I don't know if her and Jeff Fahey had any scenes, but they were in the show at the same time.
She was only on in season 3.
In season 3, that's before Lapidus. So this nun who leaves her convent,
Diane Scarwid. That sounds.
Is that her name? And she has the in the movie she has the same initials as Marion Crane. I think her name is Maureen in the film.
Maureen Coyle.
Maureen Coyle,
which is one letter away from Doyle.
Marion. Oh, it is one from Doyle. The movie wants us, and this movie was directed by Anthony Perkins.
Yeah, it was made a big deal. I remember he was on like Good Morning America promoting this movie because it was a big deal because he was actually directing. Norman Bates was directing.
Yes. And so the movie wants us to make this connection that Norman is making, that this young woman looks a lot like Janet Leigh. And I don't really think they pulled that off, because her resemblance, this actress's resemblance to Janet Leigh is, I think, fleeting at best. But that's made to be a plot point in this film, that this girl reminds Norman of Janet Leigh. And that's why he takes such an interest in her. So Jeff Fahey shows up. There's this very uncomfortable, almost rape scene in Jeff Fahey's car, where this Maureen refuses to.
Yeah, he picks her up after she's left the convent, which was wasn't there like a really violent scene? Like she was responsible for someone's death or something.
Yes, so she was about to jump off a bell tower, and some of the nuns were coming up to try to help her, and one of the nuns tried to grab her, and she pulled away, which caused the nun to lose her balance and fall to her death. And so all the nuns are, screaming at her and saying, that's it, you're a killer. And so she runs away, and she's picked up by Duke, Jeff Fahey, who's going to Los Angeles to be a rock star, which, of course, most people in 80s movies are doing this. And she rebuffs his unwanted advances, and he kicks her out of the car into the rain. And he eventually shows up at the Bates Motel, and Norman offers him a job running the front desk to help out Norman. And so, all this happens in the course of a day, and here comes Maureen stumbling, probably walking all night, to the front desk of this hotel, and she sees, of course, Duke, who she hates. And she is put up in the room at the hotel. And Norman he's a little frightened by this, because she reminds him so much of Janet Leigh. And Jeff Fahey starts to be a big scumbag around town. He goes to a bar, and there's this reporter there who takes a great interest in that he is working at Norman's hotel. And this reporter, who is still trying to solve the riddle of Emma Poole's disappearance, says, "Oh, wow, I'm interested in Norman Bates. Can you help me out?" And so you find out this woman is she wants to know more about Norman and what's going on there. But at this point in this film, we have fully settled in, as Mike said, into the adventures of Norman and Mother. He is right back, I guess. Well, we never really saw him this way in the first movie because they were hiding all of this strange activity, and in the second movie there was none of this activity until the very end. So now, I mean, in Psycho 3, we're really getting full on out in the open. Norman, talking to the corpse of his mother. We get full scenes of them having conversations, and it's really strange because to this point in the series, they've just haven't put it out there so blatantly, like just straight up Norman talking to a mummy in his room. And that's one of the things that struck me watching this today. Psycho 3, to me, it feels like the most slasher sensationalist of all the movies.
Well, I tell you another thing too, and it's something there's a scene in it I really don't care for. Is there's like, I don't think the second one has any nudity in it, does it?
It does. It's when he watches Mary.
Do you see anything?
Yeah, you do.
Oh,
it's a body double. They don't show her face, but there is a little top and bottom action.
I just don't remember that, but I remember it's way more explicit in 3. But the thing is I feel like like a sequel should sort of match its predecessor. And
in tone.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like, especially with the scene with Janet Leigh, there's no nudity. So in my mind, there shouldn't be any nudity in the follow-ups, if that makes sense.
But as we talked about, they're really embracing the 80s slasherness of it all, and especially in part 3. I think part 3 is probably the most egregious of all the movies in this way, because I mean there's really some Jason Voorhees type stuff going on in this movie, which makes it, to me, it feels like Anthony Perkins gave in a little bit to the excesses of the time. I think he felt like in order to compete in this marketplace, he needed to make Norman / Mother be able to stand toe to toe with some of these other movie monsters that were popular at the time. And for me, I don't think 3 works as well because of that. Because there's a definite tone shift between part 2, which is trying to still be this mystery thriller, whereas part 3, since there is no mystery in part 3, all the twists are done at this point, and all we're seeing now is how Norman relates to his dead mother and how he carries out these killings. And we're still dealing with Norman trying to, have normal relationships and everything to no effect, obviously. But part 3, to me, especially watching it right after part 2 today, it definitely feels to me the most, I guess, like a product of its time. In that it really was trying to compete with, the 5th or 6th, Friday the 13th film that was already out there. And it feels to me, like I said, Anthony Perkins was like, okay, we got to up the ante a little bit. There's got to be more boobs. There's got to be more, grisly killings, and there's just some stuff in 3 that, to me, while some of it is amusing and I like how he sort of plays with the history of the franchise, there's a lot of stuff to me that doesn't feel right for this character.
Well, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I just know that my feeling is when you watch all 3 of them, when the third one ends, it's like, I feel like it had an ending that ended the series well. You know, he goes back into the institution.
Yeah.
He's crazy again.
He gets caught, yes. So the movie ends. It's explained to him, like you said earlier, Mike. Basically, the plot contrivance from part 2 is undone in this movie. This reporter explains to Norman that, no, Emma Poole is crazy. She was your mom's sister, but, she did not give birth to you. She tried to steal you or something. I can't remember all of the twists and turns here, but basically, when Norman finds this out, he starts to stab the mummy of Emma Poole and dismember her. And when he does that, he's like, it like almost like sets him free. He's like, okay, well, I guess he doesn't feel that anymore. But, like at the end of, he gets taken into custody by the sheriff, and, the sheriff's like, you made a fool of me, Norman. I thought you were good, and blah, blah, blah. So Norman is in the back of a police car, and as we're driving off, he somehow has secreted away the mummified hand of his mother and starts to stroke it. And he gives the similar, look at the camera and evil smile. And that's where the movie ends. I think that's kind of the trilogy you're talking about. Like he's, he was in institutions for decades. He was released for a brief time. He went out, he wreaked some havoc, and now he's caught and he's back where he started, essentially.
And I feel like that's once again, going back to, you get what you get, when you're double dipping into, especially something that's considered a classic.
Yes.
You're going to get what you get. And I feel like you could do a lot worse than those 3 movies.
Yeah, I agree. Because, I still thought they were fun. And, Anthony Perkins.
It's making me want to rewatch them now.
Okay, well, I'm sure you will, and I wish you would, because I'd like to hear some of your thoughts after we finish up this episode.
And just so you know, this was kind of like a last minute topic, so it's not
it totally was last minute. Otherwise, I'm sure Mike would have prepared. But we're doing great. We're doing great here. Now, this brings us to the infamous Psycho 4.
Will this be the end of Norman Bates?
Oh, I've killed before. And now I'm going to have to do it again.
Or is it only the beginning? Psycho 4, the beginning.
Let me tell you something. I'm going to tell this story again. I know I've told it before on the podcast, but it was a source of great humiliation for me, which Mike and his friends seem to revel in.
Well, I don't think we realized the effect it was having on you.
Well, okay. So as I told you at the beginning of the show, I watched basically all 4 Psycho films.
Now, the 4th one was a Showtime movie.
It was made for television. But I saw all 4 of these movies within probably 2 or 3 days, because I rented all 4 of them, and I watched like 1 or 2 a night over the course of several nights. And so, I'm banging through these things pretty quick, and I'm enjoying them, because, usually if you binge something, you absorb it in a different way. And so by the time I got to Psycho 4, and I knew that this was going to be kind of a prequel. So Psycho 4 is the story of young Norman Bates, played by Henry Thomas of E.T. fame. And so we finally get to see what they have talked about in the previous films. We see the murder of Norma Bates and her lover. We see Norman's descent into this split personality psychosis. And we see him start his career as a murderer. And it's all held together with a framing device that does star Anthony Perkins.
Who, if we are to believe, has once again been released.
Yes. Now, the thing about this film is that it was written by, the screenplay was by Joseph Stefano, who wrote the original Psycho screenplay.
Wasn't he kind of trying to ignore 2 and 3?
He was, but he does insert. There are a few references to the previous films, just because at that point you really just can't avoid it. So somehow Norman.
Well, hold on. Go ahead and finish your story about when we watched it.
Okay. So, I when I first watched Psycho 4, I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was a good sort of setup story for how Norman became how he became. And for years, I saw it in 92 for the first time. It was actually released in 1990. So it was fairly new the first time
I remember when they
saw it.
made it. It was a pretty big deal when they made it.
Yeah. And I remember seeing, there was, I saw a making of on television. And they talked about how they had shot this down in Florida at the new Universal Studios, which fascinated me because when I watched it, I was like, oh, that's the house and the motel that I saw when I was down there. For years, I thought Psycho 4, I probably wasn't my favorite, but I didn't really, hold, massive revulsion for it. So when Mike and I lived in Nashville, which was
98.
98, yeah, we moved there in 98. And we all worked at the same place, Shop at Home, and we were all sort of extended family there because we were all co-workers, but we really didn't know anybody else, so we all sort of just...
We all relocated together from Knoxville.
We did. So we all kind of moved with a circle of friends, which was good. But anyway, one night, me and Mike were talking or something, and Mike's like, well, you know what? We're talking about the Psycho movies. And Mike's like, well, I've never seen Psycho 4. I was like, oh, cool. I have it on VHS. I'll bring it over and we'll all sit down and watch it. And it was me and you and Larry
and Pouyon.
Pouyon.
Was Steve King there?
I don't know if he was.
Okay.
I can't remember.
Not the author.
Yeah. We all sat down and the movie started. And when directed by Mick Garris credit popped up on the screen, there was mixture of laughter and a bunch of groans. Like it was, oh, what? Mick Garris. And I was like, wait a second. See, not being versed, not knowing anything about horror, not, my at this time, my knowledge of horror was these 4 movies, basically. And I was like, wait, what about, and I think Mike's like, oh, he's terrible. And then, so for the rest, the next, hour and a half or however long it was, I sat there while I remember specifically Mike and Larry sort of, Mystery Science Theatering 3000 through this thing. And I'm like, hey, man, they're talking about Norman's origins. Why don't you show some respect? That's what I was thinking, but I just sat there probably with a look on my face like, why did I come over here? What has happened? And, you know, since then, I see the flaws in Psycho 4. It's not a great movie. But that will forever be a memory associated with it. Is my first time watching it with Mike and our friends there.
I don't know if we need to go too deep into the plot of this one. I think your synopsis is pretty.
Well, yeah, it's basically the origin of Norman Bates.
So I do own the Blu-ray, and I think the most interesting part of this movie is listening. If you listen to the commentary, is very interesting, especially when Olivia Hussey, is it Hussey? Is that her last name?
Olivia Hussey,
who plays Norman Bates' mother and has super gigantic, huge eyes. When they come upon her nude scene she goes, "Oh my God, I forgot I did a nude scene." Do you remember?
Yes.
She
Yes.
was completely surprised that her breasts were bare.
As Henry Thomas chuckles uncomfortably.
And Mick Garris is like, "Oh, but that's okay. It's okay. It's fine." I would say, jeez. But listening to him try to discuss working with Anthony Perkins in the nicest possible way, he would say stuff like, he was interesting. He was, he was unique. I get the sense that Perkins was just not an easy person to work with.
I think this role to him became a curse.
Yeah, he really couldn't
he
break away from it.
He never was able to shed it. But I mean, he did 3 sequels, so I'm sure the paycheck helped. And he directed part 3, so I mean, his hatred of the character probably was somewhat lessened over the years.
And I think he played some similar type roles outside Norman Bates too later.
Yes, he did. This is the last film where he would play Norman. He did, and he wasn't in the movie a whole lot. Like I said, he was used as a framing device. The movie there's a talk radio show where the psychiatrist who is at the end of the first Psycho, who is now, of course, an older gentleman, he's being interviewed. Same actor. He's being interviewed.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he's the same actor from the
Isn't
end
it,
of the.
Wasn't it? What's the radio person?
She's a pretty famous actress. She's
stuff.
been in a lot of stuff. I can't.
I'm gonna look it up.
Okay, she has a very
unique voice.
Yes, and a distinctive name as well.
It's like Pounder or something strange like that.
CCH Pounder.
That's it.
Right? Yeah. That's right.
And John Landis was in it too.
Yes, he was like
the manager.
The producer of the radio show. And so what happens is Norman Bates calls in to this radio show and says, "Well, I'm going to kill somebody else." And everybody on the radio show is like, "What?" And so Norman talks more to this psychiatrist who first committed him, and we find out inexplicably that Norman he fell in love with and married one of his doctors who was with him in his last stint in an institution. And he even makes reference at one point in the film. He goes, "After the last murder 7 years ago," or whatever it was. And so, yeah, I guess you could do all this stuff and, get out in 7 years and marry your doctor, which is quite a leap to make. But again, but most of the movie does involve these flashbacks to when Norman was younger. And we do get to see the motel in a different light. It's not run down and dilapidated. Everything, it's painted this like bright yellow, and so is the house, which gave it definitely a different look. And this is the one they filmed in Florida, so they didn't use the original set at all for this one. And so we learned the story of Norman's past, and the early murders he committed, and we find out he's ready to he's going to kill his wife, which, that's great. Why don't you call a radio show? Because his wife is pregnant, and there can't be any more monsters in the world. Yes. And so he takes his wife up to the old house, and I don't know what happens. She talks him out of it or something, and he has a bunch of flashbacks, and the movie ends where they burn down the old Bates house.
But then they completely destroy the logic of almost the entire series. Because the last shot is the rocking chair rocking by itself.
Yes.
And
it's like, is this a ghost? Is this supernatural?
Yeah, these movies aren't supernatural at all. It's a guy who's crazy.
Yes.
So why would the chair be rocking?
Maybe they've got it at Spirit Halloween, perhaps. I don't know, but
it's motion activated.
So this is how our main Psycho story comes to a close. Not with a bang, but with a whimper, I believe.
I almost dismiss 4, to be honest with you.
And you can. It's totally easy to do because it's sort of its own contained thing. I mean, to be fair,
it doesn't work at all.
Well, I think Henry Thomas does a good job as a young Norman. I think he has the mannerisms down, and that part of the movie was far more interesting to me than the stuff that happened in the present day.
Oh, that stuff was terrible.
What, the present day stuff?
Yeah, with him in the kitchen.
Yeah, where he's just on the phone the whole time.
It doesn't.
Yeah, there's a reason
anything.
This went straight to cable. I mean, definitely. And I think it was really only made so they could shoot something at the new studios down in Florida. Because I'm pretty sure the whole movie was shot down here, wherever. So this wraps up sort of the main Psycho story that involves Anthony Perkins. But of course the story doesn't end, and we cannot stop this episode without talking about what I had to do today and what you had to do today.
Well, first of all, I want to say I saw this monstrosity when it aired.
Yes, you watched it live. That's like watching the holiday special live.
Yes, I remember watching it. I think I watched it with my dad.
What did your father say when that movie ended?
Well, I think we both agreed that it was awful.
Yeah, you told me, you sent a text. You said, then my dad said when it was over, well, that sucked. So,
but first of all, we haven't said what it is.
Okay.
The Universal execs had the brilliant idea of launching a anthology type TV series based on the Norman Bates and the motel mythos, if you will.
Yes.
Which ignored
all the sequels.
I think it came out. Did it come out before or after 3?
No, it came out after 3, and it was actually the last. This was the last production that used the original Bates Motel set and house, and before it was transformed by Gus Van Sant for his misadventures in the early 2000s.
But it is it's stupid. It's just stupid.
After the death of Norman, the motel has been taken over by a new owner who doesn't know what he's let himself in for. Strange things are bound to happen. Bates Motel is a chilling supernatural thriller.
It's 27 years later.
I, Norman Bates, being of sound mind.
Knowing the history of that place, I'd be out of there at the first full moon.
Bates Motel has come back to life.
Isn't that crazy?
And history will repeat itself.
Like most people, they don't go around seeing stuff that's not there.
One more time.
What are you doing here?
One last time. Bates Motel.
Because the concept is, I mean, you're 10 minutes into this thing, and it's like, who thought this was a good idea? Because the story opens with, what is it? It opens with I guess the kid in the psychiatrist who's the doctor from Voyager.
Yes, Robert Picardo.
There's this young man, we can't reach him. And apparently he was abused by his mom died, he was abused by his stepdad, and he killed his stepdad, but he won't communicate. And so what do? The doctor's trying to figure out, well, what can we do to help this kid? Oh, I know. I've got it. Let's let him meet Norman Bates, who is also in this institute.
Yes.
From that point on, you're lost. It's gone. There's no recovering from that.
What? You know who'd make a great mentor to this kid? Norman Bates.
There's no there's not enough pot or LSD in the world to get people to accept that. And so then it opens up with him looking at these pictures of him and Norman as he was growing up. There's the famous one of them protesting with signs. They look like hippies, and they're just carrying peace signs. And there's they're at a cooking contest. I mean, it's just insane. And so Norman Bates has died, and he inherits the hotel.
Yes.
So he goes there carrying Norman's ashes. And he hooks up with Lori Petty. Oh, is that her name?
Lori Petty, yeah, Tank Girl.
The most annoying, obnoxious character. And
she's faking this New York accent through the whole thing, and it is absolutely nails on a chalkboard.
It's just, yes. And he wants to reopen the motel. Gets a bank loan. All this supernatural stuff starts. They find Norman Bates' mother's body, which is strange because last time we saw it, it was in the basement of the house.
Correct.
So that makes no sense at all.
Zero.
And the first hour is just him remodeling the motel so they can reopen it. Yes. But he's seeing Norma Bates.
Oh, or in this show, she's called Gloria Bates.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yes.
So he sees her. He thinks he's going crazy. But then it gets really dumb. But believe it or not, it gets even dumber. His first guest comes in, checks in, and we find out she's checked in because she's going to kill herself. And once again, this goes to the same thing I was talking about. The Psycho 4 is this breaks the rules of the movies where it becomes supernatural.
Yeah.
Because these teenagers all show up. They're having a party. They basically drag this woman who's about to kill herself into their party. You have this really weird, because Jason Bateman's in it.
Yeah, Jason Bateman.
And he's playing this quiet teenager, which is totally against type for him. And they start having a romantic relationship, and she's considerably older It's really weird.
Oh yeah, Jason Bateman's probably early 20s here, tops, and this woman is probably 40.
So anyway, the big twist is all these teenagers are dead and they've killed themselves, and they're trying to get her to not kill herself. And you really feel like you tell they're really trying to sell it as this emotional scene, because they're like, my name is Billy. I was born in 1935. I killed myself in 1952. You know, it's like all these. And Jason Bateman, my name is Tommy. I was born in 1952. I killed myself in 1968 on Christmas Eve. And the lady is just having this breakdown, like, oh, God. So, of course, she decides not to kill herself. And
does she make out with Jason Bateman?
No. They all leave, which is funny because they all showed up and everyone saw them. And the next day, the kid is like, he doesn't say, where'd all those teenagers go? He doesn't note that they're all gone. And obviously he didn't get paid unless they're
paying with ghost money.
Yeah, ghost currency. And then he sees the lady the next day. She walks out and she's like, oh, it's such a beautiful day to be alive. And then as she drives off, he looks at the camera and starts talking to you. He breaks the fourth wall and he's like, if you're ever around. Oh, well, it turns out the mother he was seeing was the banker who was trying to scare him off the property.
Oh man, the banker.
Which I told you it turned into a Scooby-Doo episode.
Oh,
because he was wearing a mask.
Oh man,
so
that's really terrible.
It is awful. When it ends and he's like, "So stop by. You never know who you might see."
And this was the setup for a TV show.
Yeah, which
they wanted it to be.
Which the concept of doing an anthology around something like that could be interesting, but not the way.
Not that. Well, you know, they certainly had more success with it, you know, like 25 years later. Yeah.
Well, real quick, while we're speaking about bad pilots, as bad as Bates Motel is, it's amazing. It's like stuff like this is like an onion. And if you just stay on the internet long enough, you just start to peel away more and more things and stuff that's just, I guess, you know,
this onion is rotten.
Yeah, there's no hiding anymore because it all, like a blackhead, eventually surfaces, and and
all the glorious pus comes forth.
And I think it's interesting because I'd read that Anthony Hopkins Perkins.
They both played weirdos.
Yes, Perkins had commented that he thought Bates Motel was terrible, the TV pilot. But it's like, dude, I don't think you're in any position to judge anything based on the turd we found, where he attempted to cash in on the Norman Bates personality with a sitcom.
Oh, yes. The Ghost Writer.
And man, you watch this thing and it is just one wow right after another one.
You know, Mike sent this video. I forget the YouTuber's name, but she does some really good breakdowns on very obscure, typically terrible television. And it said, the Norman Bates sitcom. And Mike's caption was something like, what the holy hell is this? And it's hard to believe that this is real until you...
It's like a joke. That's not... It's like, it would be funny if it was a joke. But because it's not a joke, it's not funny. It's just awful.
I guess the premise of the show is Anthony Perkins plays a character named Anthony, of all things, who is like Anthony Stracker or something is his name. And he is supposed to be the world's foremost horror author.
I'm guessing he's a Stephen King
Yes.
archetype.
Yes. And so they live in this.
The premise
he's
is
widowed.
He's just gotten remarried.
Yes.
He has a son from his previous relationship with a wife who has passed away.
Yes.
And he's married this woman who has a daughter. And it's supposed to be one of those worlds collide type stories. You know what it reminded me of at the heart was
what?
Beetlejuice.
Yeah, I could see that. There's definitely Beetlejuice vibes here.
You know, he's a weirdo. She's a normie. Her daughter's a normie. His son, boy, that's something we have to go into in a second.
So I almost called him Norman. Anthony, I might call him Norman because who cares?
We might as well at this point because that's who he's playing.
Yeah, so Anthony Perkins and his son are sort of coming from this Addams Family type world. And as Mike said, the wife and the new stepdaughter are, 100%, vanilla as they come, normal people. And that's the whole, and that's the crux of.
And then it writes itself.
The comedy, yes.
Yeah, let the comedy commence.
And they also appear to live in this haunted house, I guess.
I mean, it's
they do live in this sort of this gothic.
It's a mansion, yes,
manor, and it's meant to evoke haunted house vibes.
And then, as if that's not bad enough, there's a housekeeper who's hot.
Yes.
And she dresses in a completely inappropriate way.
Uh-huh.
Well, actually, both the females on this show are very busty. I don't know if you noticed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cleavage going on here.
And it's weird because, at this time, Anthony Perkins was he was pushing 60 years old. And his wife and the housekeeper are probably early 30s. And they're very similar ages.
They're almost like when I saw the video breakdown. After the video's over, I was like, "Now who was the redhead?" I didn't even know who she was. It was like, is she the ex-wife? And she's like a ghost that only Anthony Perkins sees. But so anyway, first of all, Anthony Perkins is completely flat. He has no personality in this whatsoever.
Oh, and we find out from that behind-the-scenes video that he was reading off cue cards for many of the scenes.
Yeah, it's like an SNL skit when they have the guest who is like just reading off the cards.
Yes.
And but it's like the whole idea is just to set up jokes. I mean, the only reason anyone says a line is to set up for a joke.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
The okay, so that's just bad. Okay, that's just typical bad sitcom garbage. And there's a laugh track, which compounds it. And it was Anthony Perkins' idea to do it. And he got the guy who made The Hitchhiker for Showtime, which was a successful show. But anyway, I guess his idea is he wanted to do comedy. He came from doing plays. So But the really weird, the stuff that's off-putting about this, because to me, it's very off-putting. Aside from being bad and stupid, there's like the scene where I think the standout scene for me is when the son pretends like he hangs himself.
Yes.
And it's
to freak out his stepsister.
And the mother obviously is rightly freaked out, and he's very dismissive. He's not a likable character in this at all, and and it's just unsettling because I think it's like if you watch a sitcom, you want to kind of imagine like if you were in that situation, you would laugh at it, and I think in that situation you would just be horrified.
Yeah, you call the police and run away.
Yeah, and then the son comes out and he says he's threatening to discipline. He goes, "Well, I'd spank you, but you seem to enjoy that." And he's like, "Yes, please spank me. Please spank me." And you're like, "What am I watching?"
And he said something like, "Well, the last time I spanked you, you left me a tip."
Yeah, or
and
something.
It's like,
yeah.
What the heck? And it's this kid is like 13 years old.
And then, so, and like when they were writing this, did they not, like, was there not anyone who was like in the room went, "Hey, guys, I don't know if this is going to read like we think it's going to read."
Oh, man.
But then there's the scene where they hear the piano playing and then everyone comes out of the rooms and then the housekeeper comes out and she's like scantily clad.
Yeah, she's dressed in like negligee or something.
And the new mother, the new wife is like, "Oh, do you think that's appropriate to wear around kids?" And she's like, "Well, the son got it for me." And that's like supposed to be funny. I mean, I think anyone in that situation, the new wife would walk in, see the housekeeper and be like, "Yeah, she's leaving. We
don't need this.
She's not working here anymore," just as an FYI.
Oh, and towards the end of the episode, the whole deal here is weird things are happening, and we find out the house is being haunted by Perkins' dead wife. And in this very bizarre scene towards the end of the episode, the wife sort of busts out from under the staircase, and it's this, she's a skeleton, and the way they executed this effect was really, it was very poorly done. In long shots, it's obviously a woman who's in a skeleton suit, sort of like Johnny Lawrence wears in The Karate Kid. It's a bodysuit, but then when they do close-ups, it's a puppet of a skeleton. So that part struck me as funny, but anyway, the episode ends with, I was telling Mike, just such a dumb scene that really tries. You have the tone of this show, it just goes everywhere. Like, we're meant to believe that this is supposed to be some kind of sweet scene where the wife is giving permission to Anthony Perkins to, find happiness with his new bride, and they have one final dance together, which I say they're going for something sort of sweet and meaningful here, but it just, Anthony Perkins is dancing with this puppet that looks ridiculous, and then they undercut what they're trying to do by making a cheap joke out of it, and he pulls her arm off at one point. It's just bad and stupid.
But I guess the concept was each episode something would happen and it would give him an idea for the ending of his book.
Yes, because if this had gone to series, would he have been writing a new book every week?
Yeah, that's
very prolific. The episode ends. He finally takes the big giant painting of his dead wife off of the wall and puts it away in the attic. So, he can now move on with this great life that he has now. And so, that's pretty much what this is.
Was this before? This was after Psycho 4, right?
Reading up on the trivia of this thing, Fox, in the summer of 1990, Fox was a fledgling network at that time, of course, famous for The Simpsons, and Fox as a network was only about a year old at this point. So, in order to try to recoup some money, during, I think, August of 1990, Fox aired all of the pilots that were never going to go to series. So they could at least get some ad revenue off of these things that otherwise would never have seen the light of day.
Yeah.
So this was one of the failed pilots that was aired in the summer of 1990.
Oh yeah, it was the same year. Oh, I didn't realize
it was,
that.
So and he looks, his appearance in the TV show is identical to his appearance in Psycho 4. So I would imagine these were filmed very close together.
You think there'd be kind of a concern of ruining the branding for Psycho 4. But if you think about it, the storyline is not that different.
No, it's not.
He has a new wife. There's rocking chairs moved by itself in Psycho 4, a piano that plays by itself.
That's true. That's true. I don't know. Maybe they just thought like, oh boy, well, and Anthony Perkins at this point was probably just throwing up his hands and saying, well, I'm never going to not be Norman Bates to everyone. So if I could make a buck or two doing this crappy TV show that sort of plays off that persona, then, maybe that'll be fine. But it wasn't fine. It was terrible.
Yeah, it was really awful.
And thanks to the wonders of the internet, it is available now for everyone to watch who wants to. It's called The Ghost Rider. And there are actually two versions. Mike, I believe you watched the version with commercials.
Yeah.
I actually watched the work print.
Oh, really?
The work print is available also because it had like the time code and it had no commercials, and it actually has a deleted scene that's not in the broadcast version. Where
did it pull the whole thing together?
No, not at all. Because this is the deleted scene where he meets up with, I guess, the groundskeeper.
Oh, that's right. The guy, what's his face? The guy who played him in Bates Motel and his stunt double.
Once again, the stunt double pops up in a Psycho adjacent production like this. So they have a very brief scene, but it's of absolutely no consequence whatsoever. So, but if you want to see the whole thing, the work print is there for you. So, we certainly couldn't end our discussion of Psycho and its legacy without talking about this terrible, terrible sitcom pilot.
Yes. And what year did Hopkins die? Perkins?
92. Hopkins, Perkins. Yeah, he died in 1992. So just a couple years after this was aired.
All right.
Honorable mentions here go to the horrible remake of Gus Van Sant.
Oh, gosh.
Which inexplicably, decided he was just going to do a shot for shot, but then insert other things. They changed the house, which was unforgivable as far as I'm concerned. In the remake, they built a facade around the original Bates house, and it just looked like this nondescript old creepy house. It had none of the character that the Bates house that we all know has. That was one of the biggest,
to me, the two big dumb things was adding the masturbation scene.
Oh, where it was, you heard the click, clack, 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 clack.
I mean, why? And it really kind of altered his character.
Yes.
From that point, you really you just felt like he was just kind of this sheltered kid. They've made him a pervert.
Yeah, he's a super perv.
And then, of course, there was the line to sell the soundtrack when Julianne Moore tells Viggo Mortensen, "Let me get my headset." Like,
or let me get my Walkman.
Yeah, why? Why do you need it?
That was completely out of nowhere.
So
completely.
Yeah, movie sucked.
Oh man. Well, this
when they were making it, he had like a VCR with the original Psycho, so he could recreate every shot exactly. It just didn't make any sense.
No, it was ridiculous. And they spent so much money on this, and it was just like, why? What are you doing? So, I think the most recent incarnation being Bates Motel, the TV show, that was enjoyable. It had a lot of interesting twist. It wasn't a straight up remake or retelling of Psycho. It was they did something different with it, and I think for the most part it was successful.
Yeah, we watched it. I don't know if it's anything I would ever revisit, I guess.
Yeah, I mean once you've seen it once through, I think you sort of get what happens. But I did think that Vera Farmiga was a really crazy, good Norma Bates, and the kid did a good job as Norman. And of course, anytime they recreate the set of the original, I love that. I mean, and they had the sense enough to do that, at least. They had they rebuilt it in Canada somewhere, but it was the same house and the same hotel, and it was really cool. But man, I tell you what, this has been an interesting and psychotic trip down memory lane here. If you should so choose, you too can, if you haven't seen Psycho, I don't know why you would listen to this podcast, but you really need to, and revisit at least the first three. And the Bates Motel TV movie is on YouTube for free.
It's a pretty good quality too.
Yeah, I know. And something else I meant to say during that, when I was watching it, I noticed they completely stole the opening shot of Psycho 2 in Bates Motel. When it's showing the sun come up behind the house, that they just stole that from Psycho 2.
Oh,
it's the
really?
same exact shot.
Oh.
Yes. So, anyways, we're not going to waste any more time on that one. But like I said, go to YouTube and watch 5 minutes of it.
Oh, 5 minutes in, it's like you see how totally ridiculous it is from concept.
Completely.
And if you make it past that, once Lori Petty shows up.
Oh.
If you keep going.
Listen,
You're
if you want to see, Jason Bateman, what he was up to in those days, sure, go to his scenes and watch that weirdness if you want to. Fortunately, it seems like Jason Bateman's the only one that survived that trash fire and went on to have something, a successful career.
Well, he was already, I guess, was that Family Ties? He was already kind of like, I can only imagine he got rooked in. Like, hey, we want to promote this new show. Can you just show
notice
up?
how he was credited. He had his own credit there. It says, and Jason Bateman as Toby.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yes.
I was watching it on my phone, so I didn't.
So he was definitely already a name, like Mike said.
Oh yeah, he was definitely I remember when they promoted that, and he was promoted.
Yeah,
and that's like 2 days shooting for him. That's how much.
Oh, no kidding. And it's funny that Jason Bateman is one of those actors who had a successful career as a younger person. Then he went away for a while, and then just has had a complete resurgence in his late 40s and his 50s now, which is it's kind of nice to see that somebody who made Teen Wolf 2 and Bates Motel could go on to have some success.
Yeah, he came back.
But anyway, you know who else is coming back? We are very soon. So you don't want to miss it. Season 6 is rolling on. We got lots of stuff coming up. And listen, like I said, if you're
lock the door when you take a shower.
Yes, lock the door when you take a shower. And if ever you get tired and you pull off and you think you need to go to sleep somewhere, just watch out for that neon sign that says Bates Motel, because you want to keep driving, especially if we're talking about the 1987 movie. But anyway, we will be back here soon. And thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
You know you can't live without this content, so subscribe to the Hyperspace Podcasting in the 25th Century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us next time as we take you into the 25th century.